So hello everyone and welcome to this quick 5-minute review about the building blocks of Joule or Brayton cycles. So whether they're called Joule or Brayton cycles depends largely on where you come from. I think in our course that I taught we called them Joule Brayton cycles, a sort of compromise between different geographic claims. So Joule Brayton cycles are used to power a variety of different objects, engineering objects in real life. This is an example from the US. This is a US Air Force trainer. It's their T-38 trainer. It's quite elderly. It's being replaced at the moment. At the time I recorded this video, they're running a competition to get a new one. But this is a supersonic aeroplane and features 2 turbojets located sort of roughly along here in the aircraft airframe. And you can model this this propulsion system using a Joule cycle with a nozzle. So we have a compressor, a heat exchanger which simulates the combustion chamber, a turbine, and then a nozzle. And using that quite simple model, you can end up with reasonably good estimates of the sort of thrust produced by the device. You can also add a bit of complexity at extra cost. So this is an example of a slightly more modern aircraft. This is a Eurofighter Typhoon, and here I've picked this one because I found a good photograph of the afterburners working here, and so these are basically devices. Well, the afterburner is quite simple. It's really just a way of injecting fuel into the exhaust and then igniting it. That raises the temperature somewhat. And we can model that afterburning cycle, turbojet cycle with afterburning, here with a compressor, a turbine, and a combustion chamber simulator here, and we can add in the afterburner as another heat exchanger before we enter the nozzle. And again, with this, we can get reasonable estimates of performance using this Joule cycle. If you have an application where you can take more weight, such as a naval application, this is a Type 45 destroyer. I think this is HMS Diamond, but this is powered by 2 gas turbine propulsion systems that provide electrical power to drive propellers and also to power all the various systems on the ship. Now, in a naval application, you can take a bit more weight. So here, this schematic of the power plant for the Type 45, it contains both intercooling, which is where between 2 and 3 you cool the fluid that's coming out of the compressor, and that reduces the work input overall for the compression train. And it also features regeneration, which is up here, and this is where the incoming air at exit from the compressor is heated up before it reaches the combustion chamber here by the air leaving the turbine. So when you do your calculations, you find this air is quite hot, and you can reuse some of that energy by putting in a regenerator there. So you end up with quite a lot of complexity. This has kind of 8 stations in this cycle. And that complexity may well seem a bit overwhelming, but I guess the point of this video is to try and convince you that in actual fact there are only 4 components you need to look at to build up all these cycles, and in fact all the cycles in a basic thermo course. And these components, which can be stacked a bit like Lego in various ways, are the compressor, the turbine, a heat exchanger, and a nozzle. So the compressor is a device where you have a work input and it raises the pressure and temperature of the fluid. Turbine, you have a work output and it drops the pressure and temperature of the fluid. A heat exchanger is a device, well, that exchanges heat and it raises or lowers the temperature of the fluid going through it, depending on whether it's a heater or a cooler. And then finally you have the nozzle, and what the nozzle does is it takes a high pressure and temperature flow and accelerates it, so you get an increase in velocity. So this is a very useful way of trying to produce thrust. And all of these cycles, well, that we've covered in our course, and most actual cycles can be built from these 4 blocks. And also, when we look at the way we analyse this, we find there are actually only 4 equations to analyse these different components. We have our isentropic flow relationship, we have our good old friend, the steady flow energy equation on the top right, we have an efficiency. Here I've just drawn a compressor efficiency with the ideal work over the actual work, and that gives you a relationship between ideal and actual conditions. This isentropic relationship, this temperature ratio is isentropic, and the pressure ratio between actual and isentropic is the same, but this gives us isentropic relations, and then this empirical efficiency enables the ideal and the actual to be related. And then finally, and we don't use this very often, if you're concerned about regeneration, you might need to deploy a heat exchanger effectiveness. So in a bit more detail, for the compressor and turbine, we obviously apply the isentropic flow relationship there. We need a efficiency that's tuned to the compressor, so it's ideal over actual for a compressor. And of course we have our old friend, the steady flow energy equation. For the turbine, the equations are the same, except for the turbine efficiency is actual work over ideal work, and the compressor is ideal work over actual work. If you're having trouble remembering them, just always remember that they should always be less than 1. Now I've shown here the full steady flow energy equation, and you want to simplify this a bit for your application, so whether it's a compressor or a turbine, and you may find it easier simply to go straight to the W equals Cp delta T rather than work through from the simplification. But the point is it's a single equation that is driving all those applications. For the heat exchanger, we might be involved in an effectiveness. We only need this if we're concerned about both sides of a heat exchanger. Most of the time we're only interested in one, so we just apply the steady flow energy equation. And for the nozzle, the steady flow energy equation will do for you there without any further embellishments. So what I hopefully convinced you of is, although we have these quite complex engineering artifacts such as ships and aircraft, you can get the power and propulsion systems from them with only 4 components: a turbine, compressor, heat exchanger and nozzle. And you can also do that with simply 4 equations: our old friend the steady flow energy equation, isentropic expansion or compression, efficiency and effectiveness. And with those 4 components and 4 equations, you can pretty much cover the entirety of a basic thermodynamics course. So thank you for listening, and good luck with your revision.